My name is Tiffany, and I would love for you to empathize with me. Um, so that was another trauma. And so October 5th, 2019, my daughter and I were on the freeway headed to an event. And honestly, without an explanation, I found us headed toward the back of a truck, and with no time to stop, we slammed right into the back of a semi-truck. What's wild is I recently spoke about it in the TED Talk for TEDx KOB, and talking about that and revisiting that just again reminds me of the grace of God, because the truck was absolutely totaled. My daughter was fine, I'll say did not suffer physical injury. It did result in her experiencing her own bouts of anxiety from that traumatic experience where she saw me, trapped and bloodied and broken and having to get rescued with the jaws of life. I mean, I remember the glass shattering and being taken to the hospital and having friends like picking glass out of my hair for days. So as a result of the accident, my arm was broken, my hip was dislocated, and because it was one-sided, it kind of left me with needing more support and recovery. So I was in a wheelchair for several weeks and had to regain strength in my right leg. My arm was in a cast, and so even the walker that I had to be special because I couldn't use my hand for the walker. What was amazing to me was, one, that I was conscious the entire time, and while I was trapped in the truck, literally like breathing and meditating and praying and hearing prayers outside the window, and being conscious enough to let people know that we were alive and to reassure my daughter and to maintain consciousness even after receiving the pain meds. I remember things that I said in the ambulance, and I was like, I might have been a little loopy, telling them, don't rip off my boots, like, please don't tear my clothes, y'all tearing up my clothes. Like, to be in the midst of something like that and still have like enough whatever humor or to be so high that you thinking about your clothes and you got a broke nose, like, I don't know. But I was absolutely fascinated with that entire experience because I couldn't believe it happened to me. Like, I was just good, and then moments later I'm in a hospital bed. Like, how? The love of the community that was shown to me, people showing up with flowers and cards and good food, which is a whole nother thing, part of that self-care menu. I'm not going to eat the junk y'all are giving me. Like, that's not going to help me heal. So when I got into the rehab center, I was like, salad, oatmeal, fruit. You don't want don't give me, I don't want your Salisbury steak out. I don't know what that is for real. Like, just even that, like, eating differently, and then eventually, like, for real, letting myself be pissed off. Because anger was something that was forbidden in my childhood. I wasn't allowed to show anger. What child has the audacity to be angry at anything in a household that said, look at what you have, like, what do you have to be angry about? So I learned that through my journey, was to actually feel anger, and I felt it, and I was pissed off, and I fussed at God, and then I fussed at whoever else I felt like was responsible, including myself. You know what I mean? Like, just allowed myself that moment to be mad, and that's really where my healing started to take off. Once I let myself feel and told myself, okay, now that I've done that, I'm ready. And that term allowed me to show up to encourage others. It allowed me to lean more deeply into my healing in each realm of my being, so emotionally, physically, spiritually, mentally, and ultimately was able to leave the recovery to be cared for by community at my home, and even been able to travel in the midst of it all, being in a wheelchair at the airport so I could go down and be with my family down south, like all of that. And there's so many pain points and pressure points, that's what I'd rather call them, along the way for me to get to where I am today, even just from last year. But ultimately, it all supports the evolution of my being, so that once again I could be who I need to be to fulfill the purpose that God has for me, so I can help others do the same. And I give thanks. I give thanks every breath. So gratitude is in the roof, and that's probably why I'm like, y'all talk about stay at home. Listen, I was sheltered for 20, like I couldn't go anywhere. I didn't even see outside for weeks. And then at the rehab center, they took me outside, and I was like, oh, that's right. Jesus, like, how can just let me be near a tree? Like, please. I mean, you smell hospital, and you know what I mean? Like, there's just things that we take for granted, that even those who are sick and shut in, or who are disabled, or who are in a position where they are unable to really explore life, experience nature, even if it's for a few days, we take it for granted. So I do my best not to take that for granted. Ability to walk and move my hips how I want to move them, to grasp something with this hand that I had to like practice and go through physical therapy.
Wow.
All of that within the span of a year. You know, like, God is amazing, and so is the body. So if we can fuel our body with oxygen and good food and movement, like, it'll be good back to you. Like, people thought this scar was a tattoo. I'm like, nah, you don't know what this scar used to look like, man. This looked like a horror film. This used to look like a horror film, you know? So, I mean, to be able to function with steel rods in my arm, like, to actually have, you know, to see God work healing out in this body just makes me more grateful.